I want you to just, for a second, put yourself in Constantinople. It's a Tuesday morning, May 29th, 1453. And for weeks, the only sound you heard is this deafening, gut-shaking roar.
The sound of cannons, not just any cannons either. We're talking about massive bombards, some of them built by a Hungarian engineer named Orban, that have just been hammering away at walls that were considered, indestructible.
For 1,000 years.
Yeah.
The Theodosian walls.
Right.
And you've heard the stone groaning, you've heard it crumbling, you've heard the screams, and then all of a sudden the sound changes. It's not a boom anymore, it's chaos. The walls are breached. The enemy is in the city.
And that is the moment that everyone, from the emperor down to the smallest child, has been dreading. And let's be really clear about what they were expecting. Because in the 15th century, the rules of war were, well, they were brutal, but they were simple.
Right.
If a city resists you, if it forces you to take it by storm, it gets sacked. Full stop. The population is either killed or enslaved. The buildings are burned. History is, for all intents and purposes, erased. They were expecting the end of the world.
Because to them, Constantinople was the world. It was the center of everything. So they're bracing for this, for the apocalypse. But then the dust starts to settle. The smoke clears a bit. And riding through the rubble, through one of the breaches in the wall, comes the conqueror.
Sultan Mehmed II. And he's young. He's only 21 years old.
Just 21. And this, right here, is where the story we all think we know takes a sharp, unexpected turn. Because he doesn't ride in a barbarian chieftain who's here to burn the libraries and tear down the statues.
No, not at all. He rides in, he looks around at the ruins of this incredible city, the Second Rome, and he doesn't say burn the rest of it. He says, essentially, this is mine now.
This belongs to me.
And because I hold this city, I hold the title that goes with it. I am the emperor.
And that's our hook. That's the whole reason we're doing this deep dive. The history books, the ones you and I read in school, they say Rome fell in 1453. End of story. Chapter closed. But clearly, Mehmed didn't get that memo.
He absolutely did not. He didn't just stick with his existing titles, Sultan or Khan. He adopted a new one, a very specific, very provocative title.
Kayser-i Rûm.
Which translates word for word as Caesar of Rome.
Caesar of Rome. Now, that is not the title of a guy who just wants to destroy an empire.
Yeah.
That is the title of a guy who wants to steal its identity.
It is identity theft on an imperial geopolitical scale. And it wasn't just some personal vanity project. He had intellectuals and historians in his court actively pushing this idea. There's this incredible letter from a contemporary historian, George of Trebizond, writing directly to Mehmed.
What does he say?
He says, and I'm quoting here, "No one can doubt that he is emperor of the Romans. He who holds the seat of empire in his hand is emperor of right, and Constantinople is the center of the Roman Empire."
He who holds the seat. It's that simple. It's like possession is 9/10 of the law.
In this case, possession is 10/10. It's everything.
So this is our mission for today's deep dive. We are tackling this massive historical question. We're taught that the Roman Empire died on that Tuesday in May. But did it? Or did it just undergo, let's say, a hostile takeover? Did it simply change management?
That is the core question. We're going to explore the, I think, very compelling argument that the Ottoman Empire wasn't the destroyer of Rome, but its direct continuation. A sort of Muslim Rome that kept Roman taxes, kept Roman land management, Roman institutions, and maybe most importantly, that Roman ambition for universal rule.
And to get into this, we've dug up some amazing sources. We're not just looking at chronicles of battles. We're going to be looking at, and I know this sounds boring, but it's crucial, we're looking at tax registers.
The Tahrir Defterleri, the nitty-gritty paperwork that actually runs an empire.
Exactly. We're also looking at diplomatic treaties where Ottoman sultans are just throwing the most incredible shade at European kings. And, my favorite part, we're going to look at a helmet.
Ah, the Venetian helmet. It's more of a crown, really. A masterpiece of political propaganda you can wear on your head.
A 4-tiered, diamond-encrusted helmet that cost an absolute fortune. We will get to that. But first, we really have to get inside Mehmed's head. Because look, calling yourself Caesar is one thing.
Right.
But actually believing it, and more importantly, making other people believe it,
Yeah.
that's a whole different ballgame.
It is. And to understand Mehmed's thinking, you have to understand the logic of conquest in his world. It goes back to a Roman legal idea called ius gladii,
The right of the sword.
the right of the sword. But even more fundamental than that is the concept of translatio imperii.
Transfer of rule.
Exactly, the transfer of empire. This is the idea that empire, with a capital E, isn't a genetic trait. It's not about your bloodline or your ethnicity. It's an object. It's a baton in a relay race. And in the ancient and medieval world, legitimacy belonged to whoever held the capital city.
So it's not about being born a Roman.
Not at all. It's about possession.
Yeah.
If you hold Rome, or in this case, New Rome, Constantinople, you hold the mandate. You are the legitimate ruler.
It's like a championship belt in boxing. Doesn't matter who your dad was or where you trained. If you step in the ring, knock out the reigning champ, and take the belt, you are the champ.
That is a perfect analogy. And Mehmed saw this as the ultimate title fight. But here's where his psychology gets really fascinating. He wasn't just looking at the Byzantines he had just conquered. He was looking way, way back into deep history.
Yeah.
We know from the chroniclers that shortly after the conquest, he took a little trip. He crossed the Dardanelles and visited the archaeological site of Troy.
Troy, as in the Trojan War. Why there? What was he looking for? The wooden horse?
He was looking for the graves of the heroes. He specifically went to see the tombs of Achilles and Ajax. He was there to pay his respects. But the writers with him said that he saw his conquest of the Greeks, meaning the Byzantines, as an act of revenge.
Revenge. For what?
For the fall of Troy. He saw the Turks, his people, as the descendants, or at least the spiritual heirs of the Trojans.
Wait, hold on. Let me unpack that for a second. The ancient Achaean Greeks destroyed Troy. Thousands of years later, Mehmed, a Turk, conquers the medieval Greeks in Constantinople. So in his mind, he's settling a 2,000-year-old score.
That's exactly how he framed it. He was casting himself as Hector returned, finally getting vengeance. But, and this is the brilliant contradictory part, at the very same time he's reading biographies of Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, he's modeling himself on them.
So he's both the avenger of Troy against the Greeks and the heir to Alexander, the greatest Greek conqueror of all. How does that even work?
It's a masterclass in propaganda. He's trying to synthesize all of Mediterranean and Near Eastern antiquity into his own person. He's saying, I am the heir to the Trojans, I am the heir to Alexander, and by right of conquest, I am the heir to Caesar. He's creating a new imperial identity that bypasses the Christian millennium of Rome entirely.
It's like he's saying, I'm more Roman than you are because my claim goes back to the source code, to the pagan foundations.
Precisely. And that title, Kayser-i Rûm, is the ultimate expression of that. We have to look at who that title was for. Who was his audience?
Right, because I can't imagine the Turkish nomads and his army really cared about the legacy of Julius Caesar.
Not in the slightest. To them, he was their Khan, their great leader. To the wider Muslim world, in the Arab lands and Persia, he was the Sultan, a great Islamic potentate. The title, Kayser-i Rûm, was specifically calibrated for one audience and one audience only.
His new subjects.
His new Christian subjects, the Greeks, the Serbs, the Bulgarians, the Vlachs, the people who for centuries had identified themselves as Romaioi, as Romans.
He's speaking their language. He's telling them, don't panic. The management has changed, but the company is the same. I'm not a foreign invader. I'm just your new emperor.
I am the legitimate successor to Constantine. And this wasn't just talk. It was reflected in his geopolitical ambitions. He spoke of his empire as ruling the two lands and the two seas.
Which were?
The two lands were Anatolia, or Asia Minor, and Rumelia, which is what they called the Balkans, the land of the Romans. And the two seas were the Black Sea and the Mediterranean.
That's basically a perfect map of the Eastern Roman Empire at its height.
It is. It mirrors that old Roman concept of imperium fine and empire without end. He didn't see the Bosphorus as a border between continents. He saw it as the central canal of his single, unified Roman state.
Okay, but here's where I start to get a little skeptical. Ideas are great. Brand titles are great. You can call yourself the king of the world. You can visit Troy. You can put up business cards that say Caesar. But if the empire doesn't actually run like Rome, then it's just branding. It's just a really good marketing campaign.
And that is a completely fair critique. If the day-to-day life of the empire changes completely, then the claim of continuity is, a lie. But this is where we need to move from the ideological claim to what you might call the hardware of the empire.
The boring stuff.
The essential stuff, the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the land management.
Right. Because empires aren't held together by inspiring speeches. They're held together by tax collectors and land surveyors.
Exactly. And this is where the argument for continuity gets incredibly strong, almost undeniable in some ways. When you look at how the Ottomans actually managed their new European territories after 1453, they didn't come in and rip everything up and start from scratch. They kept the old Byzantine engine running.
So let's dig into that. I remember reading in the sources about the pronoia versus the Timar systems. It sounds a little technical, but it seems like it's really important for understanding how life did or didn't change for the average person. Can you break that down for us?
Absolutely. Let's look at the before picture. You're in the late Byzantine Empire. The state is, frankly, broke. They don't have cash to pay a professional army, so they use a system called pronoia. The emperor goes to a soldier, usually an aristocrat, and says, look, I can't pay you a salary, but see that village over there? I'm granting you the right to collect its taxes. You don't own the land. The state still owns the land, but you get its revenue. In exchange, when I call, you show up with a horse, armor, and maybe a few retainers.
So it's a land for service grant. It sounds a lot like Western feudalism.
A version of it, yes, a non-hereditary grant of state revenue in exchange for military service.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward. The Ottomans take over. They roll out their system for supporting their cavalry, which they call the timar system.
What's a timar?
A timar is a grant of tax revenue, typically one with an income of less than 20,000 axes, which is their silver coin. It's given to a cavalryman, a sipahi. The sipahi does not own the land. The state, the sultan, owns the land. And the grant is conditional on him showing up for military service every year. If he dies or stops fighting, the grant reverts to the state.
That sounds identical.
It is structurally identical. They basically took the existing Byzantine spreadsheet and just changed the language in the column headers from Greek to Turkish. It was a direct adoption of a pre-existing late Roman institution.
Okay, let's make this tangible. I want to role play this for a second. Let's say I'm a minor Byzantine noble. My name is Alexios. I have a nice little estate in Thrace. I have my horse, my armor, and I've been a pronoia holder for the Byzantine Emperor. Then the conquest happens. The Ottomans are in charge. What happens to me? Do I lose my house? Do I get kicked off my land?
If you're smart, no, not at all. If you don't flee and you don't fight to the last man, you can go to the new Ottoman governor, the emin, and you make your case. You say, look, I know this territory. I know the peasants. I know how much wheat they grow and how many beehives they have. And I'm a good soldier with a good horse. I'm willing to fight for the new boss.
And the Ottomans would just say, okay.
The records show that in thousands of cases, they said, you're hired. Your pronoia becomes a timar. You keep your land, you keep collecting your taxes, and next spring you ride to war for Sultan Mehmed instead of the Emperor Constantine.
Wait, really? So you actually have Christian Byzantine aristocrats serving as cavalry in the Ottoman army?
Absolutely. This is the big aha moment for a lot of historians. When we analyze those early Ottoman tax registers, the Tahrir Defterleri, we find thousands of timar holders who are Christians. Their names are listed right there in the books. Mikhail, son of Constantine, or Demetrios, son of Basil. They're not Turkish converts. They're the old Byzantine elite just carrying on.
That is incredible. And that has to be the most effective way to prevent rebellion, right? If you let the local middle management keep their jobs and their income, why would they revolt?
It's brilliant counterinsurgency. It wasn't a replacement of the ruling class. It was an absorption of it. Over a generation or two, many of their sons did convert to Islam to get bigger land grants or to rise higher in the administration. But initially, the transition was incredibly smooth.
That really challenges this whole clash of civilizations narrative we always hear about. It sounds less like a clash and more like a corporate merger where the employees are just relieved they still have a paycheck.
It was pure pragmatism. The Ottomans were obsessed with data. That's another very Roman trait, by the way, the census. When they conquered a new region, they didn't just impose some abstract Islamic tax law from a book. They sent a commissioner, an emin, with a team of scribes to survey everything. Every pig, every olive tree, every wheat field, every family.
And what did they do with that data?
They often just copied the existing tax system. They'd ask the local elders, okay, what taxes did you pay to the last guy? And if it seemed reasonable and productive, they'd just keep it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. We see specific taxes carrying over directly. The main Byzantine land tax, the akrostikon, simply becomes the Ottoman ushur, or tithe. We even have registers where we can see that the tax rates for specific crops, like grains and legumes, stayed exactly the same, usually around 10%.
So if you're a peasant farmer in Greece in 1460, your actual life probably hasn't changed all that much from 1440.
Not much at all. You're still paying a tenth of your beans to a guy on a horse. The only real difference is that the guy on the horse now answers to a sultan in Constantinople instead of a basileus.
So the hardware of the state is Roman. The software, the administration, the tax code is largely Roman. But, and this is the big one, what about the soul of the empire? What about the church? Because that has to be the biggest stumbling block for anyone trying to accept this argument. Rome was Christian, the Ottomans were Muslim. How do you possibly square that circle?
This is where Mehmed's strategy goes from being merely pragmatic to being, truly genius. Because you're right, everyone would expect a Muslim conqueror to destroy the church or at the very least suppress it and marginalize it completely.
Right. Turn the big cathedrals into mosques and let the rest of it just wither away.
But Mehmed did the exact opposite. You could very strongly argue that Mehmed II actually saved the Orthodox Patriarchate.
Saved is a very strong word.
But I think it's accurate. You have to understand the situation before the conquest. The Orthodox Church was in chaos. The position of ecumenical patriarch was vacant. The church was bitterly divided because the last emperor and patriarch had, in a desperate bid for military aid from the West, agreed to reunite with the Catholic Church.
Right. The Union of the Churches, signed at the Council of Florence, and the average Greek on the street hated that deal. They despised the Pope.
They absolutely despised the Pope. There was a famous saying you'd hear in Constantinople at the time. Better the Sultan's turban than the cardinal's hat. They would rather be ruled by Muslims than submit to the authority of Rome.
So the general mood was fiercely anti-Western, anti-Catholic.
Exactly. And the leader of this anti-unionist faction was a brilliant but very stern monk named Gennadios Scholarios. He was the guy leading the protest, shouting, "Do not betray our faith. Do not submit to the Latins." So Mehmed takes the city. He wants to establish order. He needs to negotiate with the leader of his new Christian subjects, but the patriarch's chair is empty. So he basically asks his advisors, who's the most popular and respected cleric among the Greeks? And more specifically, who's the leader of the faction that hates the Pope the most? And they all point to Gennadios.
He handpicked the guy who hated his European rivals. That is some 4D chess right there.
It's the ultimate, the enemy of my enemy is my friend strategy. Mehmed finds Gennadios. Some sources say he was about to be sold into slavery, and orders the remaining bishops to elect him as the new patriarch.
And they do.
They do. And then comes the truly incredible part. Mehmed holds an investiture ceremony. Picture this. The Muslim sultan, conqueror of the city, sits on his throne. He summons this Christian monk, and he personally invests him with the symbols of his office. He gives him a richly caped garment, a jeweled pectoral cross, a pastoral staff, and this is the crucial part, a pure white horse.
A white horse, that's not just a gift, that's a symbol. That's what the Byzantine emperors wrote.
It is a symbol of imperial authority. Mehmed is treating Gennadios not just as a priest, but as a Roman official, as a prince of his empire. And in exchange for this, Gennadios recognizes Mehmed as the legitimate Basilius, as the emperor.
So they made a deal.
A very clear deal. And out of this deal, Mehmed establishes the Rûm millet.
Let's define that term, millet, because it's not something we really have in modern politics. It's not about ethnicity, right?
No, not at all. The millet system was the Ottoman way of managing their incredibly diverse empire. It organized subjects not by where they lived or the language they spoke, but by their religious community. The Rûm millet, and remember, Rûm literally means Roman, was the officially recognized community of all Orthodox Christians.
So if I'm a Serb living in Belgrade or a Bulgarian in Sofia, in the eyes of the Ottoman state, I am legally a Roman.
Yes, and your head of state, for all civil matters like marriage, divorce, and inheritance, isn't the Sultan directly, it's the Patriarch in Constantinople. The Patriarch became a massive power broker. He had his own courts, he collected his own taxes from the community to fund the church. In a very real sense, the Roman nation survived inside the Ottoman Empire as a legal, distinct corporate entity.
It's like a state within a state with the Patriarch as its head, all under the Sultan's authority.
And because Mehmed picked Gennadios, the #1 anti-Catholic in the empire, he ensured that his new Greek subjects would never look to the Pope or the Holy Roman Emperor in Germany for liberation. He drove a permanent wedge between Eastern and Western Christianity, securing his European flank.
So the survival and even the empowerment of the Greek Orthodox Church wasn't an act of tolerance or benevolence. It was a cold, calculated geopolitical security strategy.
100%. Gennadios Scholarios wasn't just a religious leader, he was a geopolitical asset. By empowering him, Mehmed ensured that the Greeks would rather pay taxes to the Sultan in Constantinople than ever ask the Pope for help. And for a long time, Greek even remained a key language of diplomacy. The Ottoman chancelleries continued to produce documents in Greek. It wasn't a clean break at all, it was a complex, pragmatic hybridization.
So we've got the administration, we've got the religious structure. I want to shift now to the visuals. Because if you walk around Istanbul today, or even if you just look at pictures of the skyline, you can literally see this dialogue happening in stone and mortar.
You absolutely can. And first, you start with the name. The Ottomans didn't officially call the city Istanbul for centuries. On their coins and their official documents, it was almost always Constantinia, the city of Constantine. They kept the founder's name.
And then, of course, there's the building that dominates the entire skyline, the Hagia Sophia.
The ultimate symbol of Roman imperial power and Christian faith, Justinian's great church. Now, Mehmed converted it into a mosque, that's true. But he didn't tear it down. He didn't even significantly alter the structure. He preserved it. He co-opted it. By leading the First Friday prayer there, he was appropriating all the sanctity and imperial legitimacy of the Roman emperors who had been crowned there for 900 years.
And if you look at the great imperial mosques the Ottomans built after that, the Blue Mosque, the Süleymaniye Mosque, they all look like the Hagia Sophia.
They are in a direct architectural conversation with it. They all use that same massive central dome structure. The greatest Ottoman architect, Mimar Sinan, was openly obsessed with the Hagia Sophia. His life's goal was to surpass it. His mosques are saying, we can build Rome, but better. Our domes are higher, our interiors are brighter, our engineering is more refined. It's a statement of continuity and superiority at the same time.
There's also that theory about the minarets that I find super interesting. The really slender, pencil-like ones.
The victory column theory.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So, Roman emperors, especially in Constantinople, loved to build massive freestanding victory columns. The column of Constantine in the Forum, the column of Arcadius, these tall, spiraling pillars dominated the skyline and commemorated their power. Some architectural historians argue, and I find it pretty compelling, that the iconic, slender Ottoman minarets are an Islamic evolution of that Roman form.
So they're not just for the call to prayer.
They're not just for the call to prayer, they are also vertical assertions of imperial power, echoing the Roman columns of the past, marking the Sultan's dominion over the city.
It's a way of visually stamping the city as the new Rome. But speaking of visuals, we have to talk about the helmet. I teased it in the intro, and I've been waiting for this. This object just sounds completely insane.
The Venetian helmet. It's one of the most incredible, and you could say frankly ridiculous, objects of the entire 16th century. It wasn't Mehmed's, but was acquired by his great-grandson, Suleiman the Magnificent, in 1532.
Okay, describe it for us. Paint a picture, because the word helmet makes it sound practical, and I get the sense it was anything but.
It was really a crown, designed to look like a helmet. It was made of gold, but what made it so extraordinary were the tiers. It had 4 distinct golden crowns, or tiers, stacked one on top of the other, each one larger than the one below it. And the whole thing was studded with enormous pearls, a 10-carat diamond on the front, massive rubies, and it was topped with a huge crescent-shaped mount holding a giant turquoise.
4 tiers. Okay, there's a very specific, very pointed reason they had 4 tiers, right? It wasn't just an aesthetic choice of more is better.
This was the rap battle of crowns, as you put it earlier. The most powerful figure in Western Christendom, the Pope, wore a crown called the triregnum, the papal tiara.
Which is 3 tiers.
Exactly! 3 tiers, symbolizing his power over the spiritual, temporal, and purgatorial realms. By commissioning a crown with 4 tiers, Suleiman was sending the most blunt visual message imaginable. He was shouting across the Mediterranean, I am one better than the Pope.
You have 3 layers of authority. That's cute. I have 4. I outrank you.
Precisely. It was also a direct challenge to his main rival, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. The helmet was designed to say, I am the supreme ruler on earth. I am above the Pope, and I am definitely above the German pretender in Vienna.
And what did this thing cost?
The records say it was valued at 115,000 Venetian ducats.
Put that into perspective for us. What does that mean?
It's almost impossible to translate directly, but think of it as the price of a small fleet of warships. It was the cost of funding an entire military campaign for a season. It was an obscene, astronomical amount of money to spend on a piece of headwear.
And he didn't even wear it that often, did he?
Almost never. It was incredibly heavy, for one thing, and frankly, it wasn't the Ottoman style. Sultans wore turbans. Suleiman used it almost entirely as a prop.
What do you mean?
When he was marching his army toward Vienna in 1532 to confront the Habsburgs, he didn't wear the helmet. He had it carried on a cushion and displayed on a special stand outside his tent, right next to a bejeweled saddle and a portable throne. It was pure theater. It was shock and awe for the 16th century. He wanted the European ambassadors and spies to see it and go back to their masters trembling at his unbelievable wealth and imperial ambition.
It's fascinating that he used a Western-style crown, a tiara, to make his point to a Western audience. He was speaking their visual language just to insult them more effectively.
And that gets us right to the heart of the problem of 2 emperors.
Let's unpack that rivalry. Because for much of the 16th century, you have the Holy Roman Empire, based in Germany and Austria with the Habsburgs, claiming to be the true successors of ancient Rome.
And you have the Ottomans sitting in the original Rome's eastern capital making the exact same claim. And they couldn't both be right.
So how did this play out diplomatically?
It played out through insults. The Ottoman sultans flat out refused, under any circumstances, to address the Holy Roman Emperor as emperor.
So what did they call him? If you're writing a letter to Charles V, what's the salutation?
They would call him the King of Spain, or even more insultingly, just the King of Vienna.
Imagine being the Austrian ambassador. You walk into the Topkapi Palace, you represent the might of the Habsburg dynasty, the most powerful family in Europe, and the Grand Vizier hands you a draft treaty that refers to your boss as essentially the mayor of Vienna.
It was a calculated, deliberate act of humiliation. And the Ottomans would hold up negotiations for months over this point. They would stare at the ambassadors and say, "We don't know who this Emperor Charles is you speak of. We know a King Charles of Spain. There is only one emperor, one padishah on earth, and he resides in this palace."
Did they ever get the Europeans to agree to this?
They did. In the Treaty of Constantinople in 1533, Suleiman actually forced the Habsburg envoys to sign a document that officially referred to their own ruler, Ferdinand I, as merely the King of Vienna, while referring to Suleiman as the supreme emperor. They forced the Habsburgs to legally sign away their own title just to get a ceasefire.
That is incredibly petty, and I absolutely love it. The logic is just, you're the regional manager, I'm the CEO.
It was crucial to their entire worldview. There can only be one Rome and therefore only one Roman emperor. If Mehmed took the city by right of the sword, then the guy in Germany is, by definition, a pretender, a barbarian usurper playing dress-up.
But there was a third player in this great game for Rome's legacy, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Over in the northeast.
Ah, yes, Russia, the claim to be the third Rome.
Right, so after Constantinople fell in 1453, Moscow starts to articulate its own claim to the Roman mantle. What was their argument based on?
Theirs was primarily a religious and dynastic claim. First, with the fall of the Balkans and Constantinople, they were the last major independent Orthodox Christian power left in the world. So they saw themselves as the natural protectors of the true faith. And second, their grand prince, Ivan III, married Sophia Palaeologina, who was the niece of the very last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI.
So they had a connection by marriage, a bloodline, and they had the faith.
They did, but from the Ottoman perspective, what didn't they have?
The city.
They didn't have the city. They didn't have the geography. They didn't have the bureaucracy, the tax registers, the direct institutional continuity. Russia had the software, you could say, the religion, but the Ottomans had the hardware. They were sitting in the Topkapi Palace looking out over the Bosphorus, just as Constantine and Justinian had. To them, the Russian claim was a distant, irrelevant fantasy.
Okay, so we've built a really strong case here. You've got the title, the administrative continuity, the co-option of the church, the visual language of the architecture, the geopolitical posturing. It's compelling.
Yeah.
But obviously, we are speaking English today, not Ottoman Turkish. And when we think of Rome, we think of legions and togas, not janissaries and caftans. So why does this argument ultimately fail for so many people? Where are the holes?
We have to look at the counter-arguments, and they are significant. You can't just brush them aside. The biggest one, the one you mentioned earlier, is the most obvious: religion.
Rome was the Christian empire.
For 1,000 years, yes. By the time of the late Empire, Roman identity had become completely fused with Orthodox Christianity. So to the European mind, both then and now, a Muslim Roman emperor is an oxymoron. It's a fundamental contradiction in terms. And it wasn't just about belief. Legally, over time, the Ottomans fully implemented Islamic law, the Sharia, as the ultimate law of the land, superseding any old Roman or Byzantine codes.
It's like you can keep the same computer case, the same monitor, the same keyboard. But if you wipe the hard drive and install Linux instead of Windows, it's a different machine. The hardware is the same, but the fundamental operating system is totally different.
That is a perfect analogy. And then there's a more subtle distinction that some historians make between being an heir and being a successor.
Okay, what's the difference there?
An heir is someone who inherits the assets. You inherit the house, the bank account, the title deeds to the land. The Ottomans were unquestionably the heirs of the Roman Empire. They got the real estate, the tax system, the capital city. But a successor implies that the same corporate entity is continuing, just under new leadership.
And the argument is that the Ottoman Empire just didn't feel like Rome anymore.
Right. Over time, the dominant cultural influences became Turkish and Persian. The language of the court was Ottoman Turkish, which was saturated with Persian and Arabic loanwords, not Greek or Latin. The poetry they wrote, the music they played, the clothes they wore, the food they ate, the entire cultural texture of the empire drifted east, away from its Roman roots.
And the claim itself, the Kayser-i Rûm title, it faded over time, didn't it? Mehmed was obsessed with it. Suleiman used it for his own purposes. But what about the later sultans?
It became much less important, and there's a specific turning point, the year 1517. That's when Sultan Selim I conquered the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt.
Which was a huge deal.
It was a massive game changer because that conquest gave the Ottomans control over the three holiest cities in Islam, Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem.
So they had a new, even more prestigious title to claim.
A much more prestigious title in the Muslim world. Suddenly, being the Caliph, the leader of all Sunni Muslims, and being the servitor of the two holy cities was way more powerful and politically useful than being the Caesar of a dead Christian empire. The empire's center of gravity, ideologically, shifted from the Balkans to the Middle East.
They pivoted. They went from framing themselves as a European-focused Roman successor state to being the premier Islamic caliphate.
Exactly. And by the 19th century, with the rise of modern nationalism, the Roman identity was completely abandoned. The elites tried to forge a new, multi-ethnic Ottoman identity, and when that failed, it eventually gave way to Turkish nationalism.
So let's bring this all together. After going through all the evidence, the claims, and the counterclaims, what's the final verdict?
The verdict is that the fall of Rome wasn't a single event. It wasn't a cliff edge that the empire fell off of in 1453. It was more like a long, gradual slope. And for a century, maybe two, the Ottoman Empire really did occupy a hybrid space. It truly was a kind of Muslim Rome.
It kept the institutions.
It kept the institutions, it preserved the Orthodox Patriarchate, it ruled from the same palaces, it used the same tax codes, and it dreamed the same old Roman dream of a universal, world-conquering empire.
It just changed the official religion and the language of the court.
Exactly. The ambition, the imperial DNA, was identical.
I want to leave our listeners with one final provocative thought. And this, when I first encountered it, it kind of broke my brain a little bit. We are all taught to date the fall of the Roman Empire to either 476 AD, with the fall of the West, or 1453, with the fall of Constantinople. But if you accept this argument, if you accept that the Ottomans were the legitimate heirs and successors,
then the Roman Empire didn't fall in the Middle Ages at all.
No, it fell on November 1st, 1922.
When the Turkish Grand National Assembly, led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, formally abolished the office of the Ottoman Sultanate.
Just let that sink in for a moment. We think of the Roman Empire as togas and chariots and gladiators. But if this argument holds, then the Roman Empire existed at the same time as jazz music. It existed at the same time as the Ford Model T. It existed through World War I.
It means the final Roman emperor wasn't a man named Romulus Augustulus, killed by a Goth with a sword. It was a man named Mehmed VI, who was deposed by a parliament in the age of the telegraph and the airplane and died in exile in Italy. The political lineage that started with Augustus Caesar ended in the 20th century.
It's an absolutely haunting idea. The ghost of Rome wasn't just a metaphor. It was a living political entity. And it didn't just haunt the sultans in Istanbul. It haunted the czars in Russia, the Kaisers in Germany, the Habsburgs in Austria. They were all fighting over the corpse of an empire that, in the case of the Ottomans, may have actually still been breathing.
Just speaking a different language.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep questioning the history books.